Hello, my friends! We're back with another video. I am your local art witch, and today we are going to talk about Kate Freuler's Of Blood and Bones. Okay, so this was my first serious book on witchcraft that exploded, in a good way, my practice. And so I knew that I had to do a recommendation for this book and not have it as a short video. You guys need to know about this book. Now, you do not have to practice these things. Like if you're a vegan, if you're kind of see yourself as like a positive, I don't like white witch, black witch. I don't like the connotation of that. So like if you're more of a witch of good stuff only, I guess. um, but I would, even if that's where you are, you don't believe in casting hexes or anything like that, those are great. You need to follow your ethics. I would still recommend Of Blood and Bones because I think it is good for us to educate ourselves. There are protection spells and hex, like sending it back, getting it away from you. And that would be useful, right? There's great protection spells that you can do that do not require you to have animal parts. If I recall right, there's one where it's like a like if you have your own home and you want to protect your land, there is a spell for that. Now, this book is well named because if you do some of these practices, you're working with your own blood. You can work with animal bones. There's bugs, there's grave dirt. Make sure you do your research before you work with grave dirt. But there's also other human materials to use. Your urine, for example. So this book is, I don't want to say gritty because I just enjoyed it so much. And part of shadow work is being okay with what is considered gross, right? It just is. It doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be dirty. Although, like, if you really do not want to work with bones and stuff, I completely understand. When I first started my magical journey, I guess, I started from a place of mostly intention and manifestation. Like I did a lot of tea magic and kitchen magic, kitchen witchery, mostly just putting intentions into what I was cooking, what I was making. And I did cleanses and protection spells. That's all. I shouldn't say all because those are great. I think that's a fantastic place to start. It is not overwhelming. And I do think putting up your protections in your wards before starting darker stuff, if that's what you're interested in, is a good place to start. So there is shadow work in here, which is one of my favorite things to do. That's like the majority of my craft, is getting down to those parts of you that make you uncomfortable, that you're ashamed of. They don't have to be seen as good or bad. Like, I was raised as an evangelical apologist Christian, and I believed it for a real long time. And something I had always struggled with was this feeling of being unclean, not being good enough, impure, right? And that was a lot of because of how I was raised and things that I was told. Like I was constantly told that there were like demons on me, and I'll get into that story another day. But one of the main things that I dealt with in my shadow work, and something that I found really, really healing, and I would recommend to any of you, is to actually go and confront those things that make you uncomfortable. Like after I left the church and I cloistered myself in and I was doing some self-studying and doing therapy and getting on my meds and, working toward it, when I finally kind of reemerged, it's so silly. You can laugh at me, but there's this game called Creativerse that I was playing. And it's like Minecraft, so you can build, but the pieces in Creativerse are more intricate. There's like furniture pieces, and it comes with blueprints. So the blocks are already kind of there, and it will just like mass like you'll place a block and it will multiply it a little bit. So it's a lot faster to build and you don't have to do quite as much planning as you would like in Minecraft. Anyway, I was building this cathedral without thinking, and for the majority of it, it was fine. And then I got to the parts where I was putting up the cross, the pews, the sanctuary, and I was feeling panic in my chest. So things like that, I am a big believer in handling them head on. Now, when I noticed that I was getting dysregulated in that moment, at first I scoffed at myself. I'll admit, I was like, this is silly. It is a fake church. But it brought back all the upsettedness that I had experienced over nearly, I would say, 30 years of being raised, and for a while having believed it myself. So I've been on this journey for the last 6 years of breaking that down, and witchcraft has been huge, huge for that. So there are how to make certain things. There is an animal list, like with associations. And I think, like, as ideas, I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud, because I just love this dang book. I need to read it again. I think if you're vegan, you could probably substitute more than you would think. So, bone oracles. If you're vegan, obviously, you're not going to have anything like that. I have seen people they've used matchsticks. They've used, one I really like are these full cinnamon sticks, and you can put little marks on your cinnamon sticks and throw those instead. And I have seen from other people that they work really well, like accurate, which is really cool, but also kind of makes sense because cinnamon has its own associations and is used in a lot of magic. And if you're vegan, you can also still use your own fluids. So one thing, I don't remember if I mentioned it, one thing that might make you uncomfortable about this book, like it talks about bugs, grave dirt, and your own body fluids. So if you are AFAB and you're still on your cycle, so assigned female at birth, you're on your cycle, you can use your own blood. I know some of this is going to be gross for some people, and that is okay. It is valid. You do not have to do the ones that really make you uncomfortable, but I would A, recommend this book, but B, as part of shadow work, think about what it is that's making you squeamish, especially if it is your own bodily fluids, like your own blood, your hair, urine. What is it that's making you uncomfortable? Because this book will tell you about how to do these practices safely. So it's not like, and you can always, like, you use clean items, little pricks if you need a little bit of blood. They actually recommend a diabetic little thing. You don't need much. You really don't. And then with your own other body fluids, just wash up after you're done. And there's always like little medical gloves that you can use for collecting certain specimens, I suppose. There are animals like bats and whatever. You can pick up those items at a metaphysical store. I tend to be really cautious about picking up animal pieces because, one, I do not know how I don't know what happened to that animal. Were they found naturally? Are they being farmed for these items? One thing I'd like to do, like if I was to use, what was this? One of them was like, I saw the word bat. So let's say you needed, shut up with cow's tongue. So it would be, like you're basically pinning the person's tongue spiritually, I guess, like a person who's causing like verbal harm. Instead of cow's tongue, it does have some substitutions, like soft fruit, something that looks like cow tongue. But if you can draw, or like I will get some paper and I'll focus on the animal part that I may need, just really, and think of the associations and why I'm using it in a particular spell, and I'll draw it. I'll draw it to the best of my ability. You do not need to be perfect. The intention and the effort that's like the majority of it. And I'll color it so that's even more like focus. And then I'll put even more energy at the end. Like, so let's say I've drawn this cow's tongue and then I've colored this cow's tongue, and you're thinking and concentrating the whole time. And then when I'm done and I have it like cut out so I can put it in a spell jar or what have you, before I enter the item into the jar, I'll take the item into my hand, kind of like, let's pretend that's my piece of paper. And I'll go like this, and I'll focus my energy and the associations. And sometimes I'll put up like a real image on my computer of, say, a cow, and just try to imagine the energy of an animal. Like when I think of cows, I think of a gentle, kind of nurturing presence. So obviously I'm thinking of female cows. And then what I would like that piece to do for me. So another thing I really like, if you are comfortable with, like, let's say you're a hunter and you want to use every piece of the animal. It talks about, now, if you're a hunter, you would already know how do I put this nicely, disassemble an animal. But she goes into really good, like how you clean the bones. And it's dirty, smelly work. I have not done it personally, but she warns you about that. The most I've done is I have created my own bone oracle. And what we do is we buy like chicken legs, drumsticks, and we have it for supper. And instead of throwing those bones away, I'll choose some, like ones that I feel like, I'll look at the bones in general, and I kind of feel like which ones feel like they need to come into my collection, if that makes sense. And I kind of take the bone and I mentally think, put my energy out, asking the question, would you like to come and be part of my craft, basically? And if I feel overall good about it, then I'll go to the next process of getting a pot of water. I put a little bit of Dawn dish soap in there to degrease, and I'll boil the bones for a while. And then after that, once they're boiled and they're really like all the meat, all the gristles off, I have a bowl. I'll put out a bowl of salt that I have focused on, put intentions into, and I'll kind of bury these bones in this bowl of salt so that way they're nice and dry. And yeah, like I really like it. And then I check in with the bones again. I'm going to be using you for divination. Do you consent? If I start to feel uncomfortable at any point in this process, and you guys can laugh, but I'll kind of apologize mentally, sometimes out loud, and I'll, thank them again for their sacrifice in general, because they did feed me, and I will dispose of them. I'm not in an area where I can compost. That would be my ideal. I do not want to be throwing them in the garbage because it feels disrespectful. They've given up their life for me, right? And that's actually another thing that Kate talks about in here is a lot of my audience here, I assume, has all probably been raised somewhat similarly as I did, like in a Christian culture. And maybe you grew up praying over your meals. And instead, the way I do it now is instead of God, like praying to God, thanking him for the food in my house and on my plate, I thank the animal themselves. Thank you for your sacrifice. May it be used to its highest good. And it's just this practice of being mindful and thankful. And for me, it kind of means more than it did when I was thanking God. It was almost like when you thank God, you're kind of ignoring all the people, like the farmers, the drivers, the packagers of these items, the grocery store attendants. But also you're not even considering the life of the animal itself. And I'm not saying that as an attack, but it was something that I was kind of just not taking into account. So, yeah, Of Blood and Bones. It's fantastic book. I really cannot tell you enough about how much you should have this book. I got it at my metaphysical store. It was $18.99 US. I'm Canadian, so it cost a little bit more. I see that. So it's from Llewellyn, so you can even look up that. You might be able to find it semi-cheap on Amazon, but I would, if you can support local, that's fantastic. And what I'll do is I will put a link in the description. That's what I've been doing. If you're interested in this book, you can go pick it up. I do not make anything, like I'm not affiliated with anybody. Despite whatever your practice is, I would highly, highly recommend Of Blood and Bones. I think you'll get a lot of good information out of it, even if you don't use it all. And, if you're not sure, I think you could probably look to see if it's in your local library. Oh, or maybe even on Audible, maybe. I'm not, once again, affiliated, but I'm just thinking out loud because this is different from what most or many people would be comfortable with. It's just, I wanted to recommend this because it's made such a positive change in my life. And I think it could for you too. So I've been your local art witch. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye for now.